AI is revolutionizing how we write laws, making drafting faster than ever before. But speed can mask deeper problems. We need to understand what happens when algorithms start writing our rules. Four things stand out: understanding AI in law, identifying core risks, the human element, and future regulatory models. First, understanding AI in law. The immediate benefit of AI in law is speed. It dramatically accelerates the initial stages of policy creation, allowing drafters to generate foundational drafts much faster than manual methods allow. Furthermore, it's incredible at synthesizing vast amounts of information. It can pull together precedents and statutes from across a jurisdiction almost instantaneously. But simply having speed isn't enough. The biggest challenge is that these systems are only as good as their training data. They don't understand the nuances of human rights or the ethical weight behind a law, they just process patterns. This leads us to the most critical risk: bias. If an AI is fed a body of law that reflects historical inequities, say biased policing data or discriminatory lending practices, it will simply reproduce those biases in its new drafts. It doesn't correct for injustice, it institutionalizes it. This brings us to the issue of opacity. When we don't know how an AI arrived at a specific clause, we lose accountability. It becomes impossible for citizens and policymakers to trace the origins of provisions or assess the underlying intent, and that undermines public trust. Ultimately, AI should not replace the policymaker. It's a supportive tool that requires rigorous human scrutiny, a necessary layer of critical thinking to ensure the resulting laws are not just technically correct but ethically sound. And then the first core risk we must address is bias. Because AI models are trained on historical data that reflects everything from past policing records to economic trends, they don't just replicate reality, they amplify the biases already present in our society. This means if the training data is skewed towards certain demographics or socioeconomic classes, the resulting legislation will inevitably perpetuate and even intensify those existing inequalities. But bias is only half the story. We also face a problem of opacity. When a law's rationale or impact cannot be easily understood, what experts call the black box problem, it becomes nearly impossible for citizens and policymakers to challenge the decision-making process. This lack of transparency doesn't just make things confusing, it actively erodes public trust in both the technology and the legislative body itself. Then, the human element. At the core of any legal framework are not just rules or statutes, they are deeply embedded moral and philosophical principles. AI is incredibly powerful at processing data, but law isn't merely a dataset to be analyzed, it's an attempt to govern human behavior based on values like justice, equity, and fairness. These concepts require nuanced ethical reasoning that current algorithms struggle to fully internalize. This leads us directly to the critical issue of accountability. When an AI-drafted policy causes harm, say a law that disproportionately affects marginalized groups, it's difficult to assign blame. Is the fault with the algorithm itself? Was it the data used in training? Or was it the human who simply implemented the system? Establishing clear lines of responsibility is paramount for maintaining public trust. So, how do we harness the speed of AI without sacrificing democratic integrity? The answer lies in rigorous human oversight. We need to move beyond simply trusting the machine's output and instead mandate interdisciplinary scrutiny before laws are enacted. Furthermore, this means requiring transparency. We must know what data fed the system and understand its decision-making criteria. Ultimately, the solution isn't about choosing between AI or humans, it's about creating hybrid models. We must view AI as a supportive tool, a powerful assistant, rather than treating it as the primary decision maker. By integrating AI into the process, we can mitigate the risks of bias and opacity while preserving the essential role of human deliberation and ethical judgment. And then, future regulatory models. The ethical challenges posed by AI-drafted legislation extend beyond mere technical limitations. They challenge fundamental questions about the role of human judgment and governance. Legal systems are inherently shaped by moral and philosophical principles, which AI, as a tool, cannot fully internalize. For example, consider how prioritizing speed, the efficiency that AI offers, can conflict with the necessary deliberative process. Policymaking isn't just about generating text, it requires balancing competing interests and anticipating long-term consequences for society. This leads us to the practical solutions. To manage these risks, we need mechanisms that ensure accountability and transparency. This means establishing clear guidelines for AI use in legislative processes, specifically requiring human review of algorithmic outputs, mandating public disclosure of training data, and defining who is responsible when things go wrong. This brings us to the most promising solution: developing hybrid models. Instead of viewing AI as a replacement for lawmakers, we should see it as a supportive tool. This approach allows us to harness technological speed and efficiency while ensuring that human ethical oversight remains paramount. However, this solution doesn't exist in a vacuum. The challenge is compounded by the fact that there are no standardized protocols globally. The uneven adoption rates across jurisdictions complicate everything, meaning stakeholders must actively engage in international cooperation to set ethical standards and build a cohesive global regulatory landscape. To recap, AI doesn't just draft law, it synthesizes massive amounts of data, offering unprecedented speed and efficiency in legal creation. The risks go beyond simple errors. AI bias can disproportionately harm marginalized groups, while opacity obscures accountability. Legal systems aren't just about text, they rely on moral philosophy. Human oversight is the necessary anchor for ethical balance. Moving forward requires clear guidelines. Hybrid models are key to harnessing AI's power without sacrificing democratic integrity. The goal isn't replacing lawmakers, but building a system where human wisdom guides algorithmic speed.